press record, you all probably are going to get some kind of a question in terms of saying if you're okay to record, but we are now recording. So again, my philosophy on deconstructing racism and how we commit ourselves to change is awareness, knowledge, skills, and action. So let's start thinking about some of our readings and how the scholars that we were listening to helped us move in this direction. So you all had an opportunity to watch Robin DiAngelo. Robin DiAngelo wrote this book on white fragility. And it was a bit long, so it was about an hour and a half. And if you haven't read the book, I've got one in my office if anyone wants to come by and borrow it. But she is a powerhouse, right? So she helps us to start thinking about white fragility. And one of the things that we know is that this is hard work. All right. So we have to step outside of our comfort zones and we have to step outside of those safe spaces to really think about why this is hard. And at times, we're going to be angry. There are times when we're having some of these conversations that we're going to be sad. And then there are going to be times where we feel affirmed. As a person of color, sometimes I get affirmed having other people acknowledge that atrocities happen in this country in regards to people that look like me. And we need to bring that to the forefront. And there are going to be times where I tear and I cry because I'm in pain. And that is okay. So let's think about Robin DiAngelo and this concept of white fragility. When you looked at that video, or perhaps when you read her book, what were some things that you thought of as she was talking about these concepts around white fragility?
I wanted to say when I was watching the video, it just seemed like we don't really address these things. It's almost like we always turn it back around. It's like, well, this is not the white problem. This is the people of color problem. We don't have the problem. It's them. And I thought that it was really good that she highlighted that.
Exactly, right. Yeah, so it's a people of color problem, but the reality is it's all of our problems, right? So we go back and we ask ourselves why, why people are in poverty, why we see this mass incarceration. And we have a tendency to think them or they or the other. But the reality is we need to understand how it impacts all of us. So thank you so much. So, yes, it's not the other's problem, but it's our problem. It's not one person's problem when it impacts everyone, but it's everyone's problem. So thank you so much for bringing that forward. Other thoughts in terms of as you were hearing and listening to Robin DiAngelo? Was there anything that stood out? Nothing stood out? All right, well, I know you're going to write about it in your discussion post. But I think the key for me is that she challenges us. And she does say that, again, we need to step outside of these comfortable spaces and we need to dive into these issues and we need to go back and ask ourselves why we think the way that we think. So we started off class and I told you that I'd like for you to define black and define white. And we defined it and we were beginning to start saying, okay, well, gosh, if my socialization and my education has allowed me to define these colors, and then if I put these colors on individuals, that gives me a sense of what I might start thinking about others. So again, we go back and we think about dark and we think about people that are skin colored like myself and identified as black. And we go back and we think, okay, all the things that come to terms, or when we think about black, evil, dark, night. And then we think, okay, well, again, how do we come up with race, right? We start assigning those traits to people. We think about the concepts of white, clean, pure, and we start putting those on people that identify as white. And that's how we began to start understanding race. That's how we began to start understanding who people are. Again, very early on, we're beginning these to learn these things. So it's our task to deconstruct those. Mr. White, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something else on the issues talking about white fragility and something that's been explained to me a lot of times. I can't remember if it was in a video, but I remember it was just presented to me by many people that if you think about white fragility, and I was talking about the way that we always turn it back where it's not the white problem, but if you put maybe not always, but I would say a fair amount of the time, if you put a white student in a room full of students who are not white or people of color, they might feel different from what they used to feel. It might not be a bad thing, but it might just be different. And I think it was something that like because it's not something that people address a lot or think about a lot,
Absolutely.
especially at Springfield College. It's we don't have that, so we don't really think about it.
Absolutely. So you're talking about power, right? So I teach this type of class for graduate students, and I do this project called an immersion project, right? Because I want students to begin to understand living in someone else's experiences. So, Mr. White, you're talking really about immersing yourself and trying to understand the other. So, again, how do we understand that this is everyone's problem? This past year on campus, we've seen our BIPOC students saying that the campus isn't welcoming, the campus isn't safe, the campus isn't our community. But one of the things that we have to understand is, well, how do I understand their experiences? I can't physically understand their experiences because I don't know what it's like to be a Black student on campus. But how can we get there? How can we try to figure out someone else's experience? So, Mr. White, you were talking about choosing law schools, and he said that for those of you all, if you don't mind me sharing, but one of the law schools that Mr. White is looking at is Howard University in Washington, D.C., a historically Black college. So, if Mr. White gets accepted, and I will write you a great recommendation letter to Howard University, and you are sitting in that classroom, guess what? The majority of students are going to not look like you. You're going to understand how it then feels to be the person that's on the outside looking in, or to not get things when people have commonalities in terms of jokes and so forth that they can speak about. And you're going to sit back and say, okay, well, gosh, now I see. You're going to begin to start seeing how people are treated. So I want to encourage you all to try to figure out how can you immerse yourself into someone else's experience. If you have not attended a mosque, I want to encourage you to attend a mosque so that you can hear and learn about perhaps the Islamic faith tradition. If you have not been to a Jewish church service or a Jewish service, I want to encourage you to do that so that you can step outside and understand. But that helps us to try to figure out how the others live. So thank you for bringing that forward. So thank you. But yeah, so if we gain a sense of understanding about people have different experiences, and their experiences are really based on their socialization, and their experiences are impacted by other people's socializations, it impacts all of our realities. So which is really interesting. I go back and I think about the concepts around social capital, right? So for those of us that had the privilege of having college educated parents, we had the social capital to understand what it would be like to be on a college campus. But for many of our students that are first generation, they didn't have that experience. And we can create experiences on campus where they feel like the other because they don't know some of the ins and outs on campus life and how colleges operate and function. So just like perhaps BIPOC individuals, those first generation students may feel like the campus isn't welcoming because they don't have the knowledge or the skills to fully understand and to navigate the community. So thank you so much for that, and go back and check out that video. If you don't have the book on white fragility, please, please, please take a look at it. Even if you don't get through it, it is a great opportunity for you to start diving into it. So let me just before we talk about the reading that was from the University of Michigan, let's try to define a couple of these concepts that we're going to hear over the course of the semester. So, racism. So, one of the ways that I want you all to think about racism is as a system, not an event. So, sometimes we think about race and racism as kind of one time someone says the N word or one time someone discriminates against someone, but it's not a singular occurrence, right? It's a system that creates the us and the thems. So we need to understand racism as a system, not as a singular event. So when we go back and we think about defining the N word and why someone would be comfortable with that and using it as a term of negativity, we have to unpack all of that as well. So it's not a singular event, but it's a system that makes individuals that are targeted groups continue to feel marginalized. So we're going to talk about that a lot over the course of the semester. Prejudice. Prejudice is discrimination or antagonism directed at persons of color. So prejudice is discrimination or antagonism directed at person of color. You know, how do I make you feel less than? What are some of the things that will make you feel like an outsider? So we're going to talk about that a lot over the course of the semester. Diversity. Diversity is the state of having differences, right? And obviously, we're diverse in a lot of different ways on campus. We're diverse in terms of where people come from. We're diverse in terms of the color of people's skin. We're diverse in terms of our gender identity. We're diverse in terms of our sexual orientation. We're diverse in terms of our spiritual beliefs. So we are diverse. So we cannot help but be diverse individuals. So we're going to talk about that a lot over the semester. And then we're also going to talk about this notion of equity. So equity is the hope of being impartial. I want to treat everyone the same. I don't want to have I want to go beyond treating everyone the same, but really kind of try to figure out what does that group need. So we're going to talk a lot about equity. And then lastly, we're going to talk a lot about inclusion. And inclusion is the state of being included. And I heard a definition many, many years ago that I think helps to help me understand inclusion. So diversity is being invited to a dance, right? Because we're in a room and we've been invited to the dance. But inclusion is being asked to dance because now we're being engaged, we're being part of, as compared to just simply being. So we want to really think about some of those terms that are going to help us move forward over the course of this semester. So let's jump now into a brief conversation in terms of the Michigan reading, and it was I'm So Tired by Robert Sellers. So I'm So Tired by Robert Sellers. Robert Sellers talks about being tired because this isn't new. I'm someone that has dealt with issues of race all my life. I also heard my parents were dealing with issues of race. My grandparents were dealing with race. So he says, I'm tired. This is a major issue that we continue to have to process and continue to have to deal with today. So we understand that people of color can get tired. It is hard to always be the other. It is hard to try to get others to validate your experiences. So he's tired. So Callie, when you read Mr. Sellers and he was talking about being tired, what came to your thoughts? What came to your mind?
I thought because I kind of felt like over the summer when the protests and when like Black Lives Matter movement was gaining popularity, um, like I felt frustrated by that
Mm,
because it's not a new thing. Like
yep.
it's very much racism has very much been a thing. So to see people kind of see it as a trend or like just reposting things without necessarily knowing. like the full background behind it, it was kind of like I thought it was frustrating.
Thank you. So yeah, so we get tired because this is frustrating, right? So thank you for being open and sharing that, right? This isn't new, but we get a lot of people that have kind of jumped on, and then how many of you all have heard of keyboard activism, right? I can like stuff, I can do all these things because it's a new concept to me, or maybe it's something that I've just never paid attention to. But for people of color, for BIPOC individuals, it's not new. Our plight, our stories have been told for generations and generations. And because you're just now seeing it doesn't mean that it hasn't happened previously. So thank you so much for sharing that. Jacques, so what did you think of when you were able to hear and read Mr. Sellers' comments or words?
This might be a little, in the outfield here, but it kind of reminded me of by Bob Dylan. I don't know if you've heard that song, but it's really like kind of like pretty much like proposing all these in the song, he's proposing all these questions, and that's kind of what I was getting from this. There's a certain part of it. It says these times really do raise really do raise for me the question of how long we must wait, plan, work, march, agitate, forgive, and vote before we have a society in which all lives matter equally, regardless of race and color. So that's kind of the hint that it gave me, is that it's and you can ask that question to anybody, really, like not just other people of color, but also white people. Um, how long is it going to take for this to happen, or for things to get what we think will be better? um, you know it's really interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. So you have to send me that Bob Dylan song. I look forward to hearing it. But yeah, so how long, right? So that goes back to, Kaylee's conversation around frustration. So, Mr. Sellers is talking about, you know, we vote, we stand up, we do all of these things, but our humanity, who we are, is still not validated. And this is an ancient history. Go back and think about this recent presidential election, right? So this is not ancient history. And you go back and you talk about frustration, right? So Black people came out, they voted, they expressed themselves, especially in these battleground states like Georgia, Nevada, Pennsylvania. And there were white people that were trying to disenfranchise them, trying to tell them that their vote didn't matter. That's where some of the frustration comes in. But I like that Sellers ended it on a more positive note, right? Because he was saying that while I may be sick and tired of being sick and tired, and that's a Fannie Lou Hamer's statement. For those of you all who are not familiar with Fannie Lou Hamer, she was a civil rights icon, and she made this statement of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. She was a voting rights activist many, many years ago in the late 50s, early 60s. And Sellers is kind of taking this "I'm so tired" from that statement, but she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. But Sellers ends his essay by talking about the fact that we can't stop. So, Sana, why do you think he ends by saying, while I may be frustrated, while I may be sick and tired of being sick and tired, while I may be tired, I can't stop? Where is he coming from? What is bringing him to that realization?
Um, for me, I took it as like for the ending, I took it as like as it. There's so much that's happened, and I feel like there are plenty of points in time where we want to give up and we want to just kind of just like just just be like forget it, like because you get so frustrated, but at the same time it's like if you stop, is anything really going to happen? And I think that like for example, with the height of everything, I've talked to my friends and stuff, and a lot of them are like, I'm tired of educating. I'm tired of, repeating myself. But all in all, if we don't do those things and we just kind of like sit there and let things happen, is anything really going to change? Like we've seen things change despite how long it might take or how tiring it gets, but we still should do it, it opposed to like not doing anything.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Exactly. Yeah, we have to do this work because we don't want to go backwards. Right. So while we are tired, while we are frustrated, while we are angry, while we perhaps have tears, we can't go back. There is a cost to going backwards. And many of us aren't willing to accept that cost. And he brings it home by saying that it is our birthright. Right. That to me was just so moving. He says, "This is my birthright." And I go back and I think about, I grew up in the church. My dad's a Baptist minister, and I think about those old Negro spirituals that I grew up listening to. And I'm no ways tired. And songs that were songs of uplifting, and they were talking about individuals that were enslaved, and they kept on keeping on. And they talk about that birthright. I go back and I think about the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and I think about people like John Lewis and Dr. King and many other civil rights icons walking over that bridge, getting hit, getting beat upside the head. I go back and I think about someone like an Emmett Till, who, for perhaps whistling or saying something at a young white woman, had his life taken. His mother gave him an open casket funeral because she wanted others to see the evils of racism in our society over someone beating and killing and drowning a young man of color. I go back and I think about the George Floyds, and I go back and I think about the Breonna Taylors. I go back and I can think about the numerous other individuals that have been killed at the hands of police. And if I stop, was their death in vain? If I stop, was their protest in vain? If I stopped, was their sitting at a counter in vain? If I stopped, was her sitting on a bus in vain? Rosa Parks. So we have to think about our birthright. If I stopped, I do a disservice not only to me because we perhaps don't move forward, but I also do a disservice for all of those others that have marched before me, that have stood up against racism, xenophobia, and the alike. I have to continue to move forward. He says, the investment my ancestors made in this country is something that I cannot let go. The investment my ancestors made in this country is something that I cannot let go. So that's kind of our challenge and our charge: awareness, knowledge, skills, and actions. We have an awareness that this country, our campus, is not where we ultimately would like to be. While we strive to be an inclusive, welcoming environment, we know that there are many that perhaps don't see the campus as an inclusive and welcoming space. You all have chosen to take this class to gain a sense of knowledge, to try to figure out why, to understand perhaps why others believe what they believe, why others do what they do, and the like. You all are going to develop some skills. We've already talked about common language. We've already talked about some of the things that we can do and say. And we're going to have to stand up. We're going to have to be like Mr. Sellers. And we're going to say, while I may be tired, either as a BIPOC individual continuing to have these conversations, or as a white ally or an accomplice, I may be tired, but I have to continue. I have to continue this journey. I have to continue this dialogue because the price of stopping is too high. The price of stopping is too high. So I am so thrilled that you all have chosen to take this class. When you come back to class next week, check out the readings, watch the videos, and this is what our process is going to be. We're going to process, we're going to dialogue, we're going to dive into it. Make sure that you get onto that discussion post and talk about your thoughts, your feelings, your perspectives on the readings, the videos, and respond to each other. This is a class where we challenge each other, we question each other, and we just engage, because that's where the real learning can occur. And then again, my framework: awareness, knowledge, skills, and actions. I want you all to really focus on action, because the only way that we can deconstruct is to understand why we have constructed it the way that we have, and then dismantle it. And dismantling and deconstructing is action. It's easy to leave something the same, but to act, to do, is the hard part. So thank you for challenging yourself to do. All right, before I let you all go for today, are there any comments or questions? All right, well, I see some of you all are back on campus, so I will hope to see you all perhaps on campus soon. For those of you all that are not on campus, have a great rest of your day. And I look forward to reading your discussion post, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I've got the best email address on campus. I know, Jock, you probably know what my email address is, right? All right, it's chill at Springfield.edu. I always tell people it's the best email address on campus. All right, everyone, shoot me an email if you have any comments or questions, but I look forward to going through this journey with you. And I want you to come to class each and every week willing to challenge yourself, because that's the only way that we're going to create change. All right, have a great day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.